Okay, cool. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. This is Karate Without Belts. I'm John.
And I'm Jeremy.
Welcome back. Today we are gonna get into something everyone has been talking about to me about this podcast because of how it's named. We're gonna talk about when is rank necessary, or is it at all? But first, before that, Jeremy, how the hell have you been?
Oh, this week's been better. Finally got my brace in, so I'm walking better, almost normal, not quite, but it's definitely relieved a lot of pressure. And between that and chasing a raccoon with a noontay bow out of my neighbor's garage, hey, it's using karate for the suburbs. You can take that noontay bow and get a raccoon out of your garage. Hey, it's all good. So, and it's the noontay bow is now the new suburban name is raccoon harpoon. So it's all good. So,
I'll never. Well, admittedly, did you kill the raccoon in the process?
no,
I think our
no, 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 we didn't.
I don't want Pete to be starting to call this podcast.
No, no, we set up a ramp and we nudged it with that thing with the noontay bow, and it finally went down the ramp and out the garage. So it was all good. So yeah.
Good, good. We don't have anything like that. We have like where I live, we got ferrets. But I don't know if if they're U.S. ferrets or they're native ferrets.
Yeah,
So
they're kind of
quick,
weird.
quick background is that Okinawa and the kind of islands surrounding Okinawa, one of which I live on, which one I won't say, um, have habu, which are the poisonous snake. And so when the U.S. Marines set up shop on these islands about 7 years ago, they were like, you know what? Let's have mongoose and ferrets attack the snakes. Well, I live on an island where they don't have those snakes, but yet we got like mongoose like ferrets. So I have no idea where these things came from. No one can really explain it to me, but they just suddenly popped up one day. And they're like, "Oh yeah, they live here too." So,
Hmm. Good
hadn't
to,
had to use an anti-bow on that. I've got a car
uh,
for that.
well, hey, there's always hope for some time down the future. So look at it that way. So,
Well, funny enough that the local, I guess local enough Nunty Bow retailer will just kind of turn me down when they want to when I ask for something like that. Like they'll just say, "Oh, it's really long. It's gonna cost more money to send. So when are you coming down to Okinawa?"
yeah.
So like it's just, "Oh, it's inconvenient for us to give you the product, so we're just not gonna give it to you," which is weird for a business to say. You'd think.
Yeah, that's odd. So, it's odd.
Yeah.
Go figure. But cool.
Cool. So you were mentioning to me when we were getting things started that we had talked a little bit about this off air about whether or not rank was even applicable or when it's necessary. And kind of when we talked about rank like the first podcast way back in January, but haven't really touched it since. And I'm always a little. Should we talk about it? Should we not talk about it? It's kind of like politics and religion at dinner for me to a degree. But I think it's you brought up a worthy subject. Is it when is it necessary? Um, and I think there may be some calling for it, but um, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to go with my standard answer of it depends. So I'm going to go that route. I think from from that, I think a lot of it depends on the culture that you have developed in your organization, in your training environment,
Hmm.
and how are people actually relating to each other. is anybody relating to each other like, yeah, I'm this, that, and a bowl of Cheerios or whatever, or is it, hey, look, all I do is have this rank just because I've met these requirements. I can teach this, things like that. So I think there's a dual place for it, but I, I I once again think that it depends on what the culture is inside the dojo and the training environment. So I think that's the big kick. I mean, we can get into both sides of it. I don't mind that at all.
Right. I think if I can play up history a little, going from an Okinawa perspective, not from Japan.
Mhm.
The Okinawa perspective, at least back in the day, there really wasn't rank. There really weren't organizations. There was just dojo to dojo and teacher to teacher. And people and there's an odd history of teachers being very open and then teachers being very closed, and organizations having to deal with a lot of that. But it wasn't. Everyone acts like rank was this age old thing, and it never was. It's maybe been around in its modern incarnation for 70 years. Um, probably a little before World War II, when Funakoshi was deemed it from the mainland.
Right.
So, from a historical perspective, it is a rather it's rather a new process. Now, is that to say, is this is kind of how it occurred? And then the better question is it necessary? I think how it stands now for a lot of people, I think it ultimately burns itself out quickly.
Yeah, I, I I agree with that to a point. I mean, especially in an actual learning environment. If you've got rank, and I always notice this a lot whenever when I teach different places and stuff. You have somebody say, I'll just throw out the rank kind of diversity deal. You have somebody that was maybe a beginner belt or something like that, someone who's a beginner,
Right.
but they were afraid to ask questions of a higher ranking belt, like, third or fourth degree, something like that, as as opposed to, okay, well, I can ask this one guy who's almost black belt, and it would get kind of a you get kind of a weird sense, like you're trying to go around whatever's going on. You didn't really want to confront somebody or talk to somebody because you felt like either one, you weren't good enough, or two, you'd be humiliated by somebody who's that high of a rank. And I'll never forget this. I mean, one story was with Jim Lowe when we went to Okinawa. I mean, he was one of the most gracious people I have ever met in my entire life. Now, he taught me several lessons, not just about karate, but also about the human aspect of things. And I think that was some of the gold that I got out of my training. I mean, it wasn't just this, it was that. And that helped me be a better instructor because then I could see that in people. It's like, hey, look, no, come here, no, and kind of be more humble towards people as opposed to, well, kind of like the Joe Piscopo character from Sidekicks. He'll put his hand in his belt and just kind of walk around like his hands were six shooters or something. It's like, you know, and everybody's met an instructor like that or who's been around for a while, but
Right. And there's a weird social structure that happens from all of that because you don't really think about any sort of interaction with anybody else in any other way other than in maybe supposedly traditional martial arts school that way, right? If you're walking into a I don't know, let's say a class at a university, right? Everyone's dressed in kind of regular clothes. If
Right.
you start a job at, let's say, um, a bank or a business, right? Everyone's kind of, or you're starting a new job as a teacher, you're starting a new job as an engineer, right? Or you're starting a new job as a construction worker, right? There's no defining outward symbol that distinguishes people
Right.
normally,
Right.
right? Military, I think, kind of does that, and
Oh
I think
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
and that's where the carryover aspect of it
Right.
begins, but that's also where it ends, because unless you're actually in the military, then it doesn't really carry the same meaning in that regard, because we can live in a society where that isn't based on rank. Now, what's interesting is this with some people who don't, with some schools of martial arts that don't have that, don't have external ranking, they do have internal seniority, and that comes from basically age,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
people who've been training longer than others,
Right.
which by the external of showing the belt, right?
Yeah.
That is to kind of show that. But uh, when is it necessary to have that, I guess, external symbol, and when isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it necessary?
Right. In a way, it brings me back to an instance with Robbie Morris. Is when his school
Your first
closed.
instructor.
Huh? Yeah, my
Your
first
first
instructor.
instructor.
When the school closed, I asked him, I'm like, what can I do? And he says, well, I've promoted you to Shodan. You take that certificate wherever you want to go, and they know you've got a base level of knowledge. And so, in that aspect, in one way, I do think that's not a bad thing because you can walk in somewhere else, not so much gloating, but saying, hey, look, I'm not trying to be a jerk or anything, but hey, look, I do have a base amount of knowledge. I'm not trying to do something different or anything like that. I just kind of want to come train with you and things like that. Um, and I think that sets a level set for instructors you go and train with.
Hmm.
I I think that aspect okay. Now, as far as the degrees and all that kind of stuff, um,
Well,
I
that's what I mean by it ends up being like ends up kind of nullifying itself in the end,
right,
because
yeah, I agree. But
you have
I can see that instance. I can see that instance as it's I don't know if it's a benefit or necessary or whatever, but it is a way to communicate to somebody who's maybe even a different style. And you
right.
go in, it's like and that way it's like, oh, okay, I yeah, we can work with that stuff like that. So
And I think you can just start doing karate, and then people should be able to just see, oh, right, you know X, Y, and Z, whether or not whatever that is different for each school, right?
well, I think that brings up a whole another twist to this conversation.
Ooh, twists.
Yeah, trust me.
As long as it's not like M. Night, we're fine. And I'm from Philadelphia saying that.
All right, the plot thickens. No, I think, I mean, you bring up a great point that an instructor should see someone's skill right off the bat. I mean, if you're truly a seasoned instructor, someone who's been around the block, who knows what they're talking about, they should be able to see skill. Then you get into the trap of some instructors that basically say, I don't know if it's robotitis or what it is, but that's kind of what I kind of call it. It's like, this is the only way that we do this, and that's the only way we're going to do this, period. There is no variance, there's no this, there's no that. We do it this way. And it's like, okay, I think that kind of negates that instructor's ability to pick up on skill, and the person coming into that training situation is left like, what the heck, do I really want to be here? Do I want to kind of grow, and I don't feel like I'm maybe growing in this
Right.
environment.
Exactly. And then what's that person gonna do who walks into that environment? How long are they gonna really stick with that? And then what kind of environment, what kind of people are you growing in that environment? Um, but I mean, I feel like karate, especially if you've been around the block, hopefully you're not so roboticized
Yeah.
to the point where like you can't understand like a Shorin-ryu guy and a Goju-ryu guy and a Uechi-ryu guy and a Ishin-ryu guy all kind of walk into the same bar. And is it really gonna be that different? Is it really gonna vary that much? Maybe, probably not.
I mean, it's interesting. Somebody who's trained and is skilled at looking at somebody else's skill, technically you should be able to watch someone walk and kind of pick up on what kind of skill they have.
I agree with that fully for more
I,
more than one reason.
I mean, it in I haven't done this in a long time, but I remember when I was I got a couple little stories from my college days. I walked up to a guy, and I saw him in the hall, and I just walked up to him. I'm like, "How long have you trained?" And he looked at me and he goes, "I don't know you." And I'm like, "Yeah, you trained in something. I'd assume probably Taekwondo or something like that, but at a pretty high level." It's like, "How long have you trained?" And he was just like, "How did you pick up on that?" I was like, "I'm just watching how you walk, how you carry yourself. I can tell that." I said, "And it's not military. I can tell that it's not military." And so he's just kind of like, and so it was funny. Over the last 23 years, we still stay in contact. We contact, we talk to each other and stuff. But you got people. You should have some kind of skill to be able to do that, and I don't think a lot of people. Well, I shouldn't say I don't. I don't know, but I think when somebody gets into that robotic mindset, this is the way we're going to do it. It does not change. It's like, well, maybe you need to
Well,
open your mind a little bit. So
and then those people really aren't. Those people are training in one specific thing only, and
right.
then and that kind of brings us back to tests
Uh,
and grading and things like that, and needing to fill out a chart, which I think you can write stuff down on a piece of paper, but at the end of the day, that's not because you're not really evaluating skill, you're evaluating how much someone can monkey see, monkey do a form or an exercise.
well, it it depends. I remember. I will say this. I remember my black belt test with Robbie, my first instructor. To this day, that is the hardest test I've ever been through. And no offense to Sensei, Mr. Oyata, but I mean his test was grueling. Don't get me wrong, but I will say this: Robbie's was the toughest thing I've ever done,
Hmm.
and I don't know if I've even told you what my black belt test with him was.
No, I don't think you ever have.
So basically, he sat me down, and we're just in a living room. We're just in a living room, and he sat me down and he says, "Jeremy, take a load off, relax. This is what you're going to do. Okay, we're going to test you for black belt. So what you're going to do is you're going to verbally walk the other black belt that was in class. Her name was Vicky. You're going to walk her through every motion of Nanachi Shodan from head to toe. Every position, every this, every foot change,
Hmm.
everything." He said, "I will allow you to have 5 mistakes. That's it. And I will call them out." And he did. I
Wait,
mean,
so just so it's clear, you didn't actually move or anything. You
no,
had to verbally articulate
yes,
to the other person how to actually do the kata.
exactly.
Interesting. That is interesting.
And I, and like a lot of people, and I mean, Robbie says, "Look, you've done all these kata for years. It's like you know how to do them in your sleep, not a problem. But can you actually walk somebody through it?" And
Hmm.
so, I mean, he was truly training me to be an instructor and how to communicate with people and how to break something down and how to do these things. And so I'm not trying to get back to it, but getting back to it, I mean, that was a test. Yeah, I mean that was intense. And you better believe, yeah, I heard that sucker. You better believe it.
And that was
And
all you had to do for that.
that was all I had to do. But I mean, I mean, it was like, I mean, and the instructions were you start from the top of the head all the way to the toes, and then you move the next movement, and then the next movement, and then the next movement. Anytime,
Okay.
huh?
Okay, so you have to verbally, from head to toe,
Mm-hmm.
explain and expect someone else to do a form. I'm assuming that person already knows?
Oh yeah, yeah, yes, yeah. I mean,
Right.
and I will say that she was not bashful for calling out mistakes. I mean, she flat out say she was, "Look, I really don't want you to have your black belt, to be perfectly honest."
That's good.
I
I
mean,
mean, that's terrible, but that's good.
but I mean, I so I mean, in that aspect, when I got that certificate and stuff, I mean, to me, that meant a little bit more than just, yeah, I can do it. I can explain it. I can communicate it. So I think getting back to the conversation of this, each person I think really needs to ask themselves, what does this rank really mean to you?
Hmm. No,
What
and
does it mean to you?
I can relate to that. I mean, my mine was not what yours was, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of a test like that, it was very boilerplate, almost like a stage-esque. The owner of the school where I started, I say owner because he didn't really teach it all. He still doesn't to this day.
I got you.
Um, but he had people. It's weird. I've been around great people, but around terrible owners of schools, and we all always kind of mistake them for teachers when they're really not.
No,
Um, but I've been around wonderful people who were a part of them, and the people who were my real instructors in that case. kind of pushed me to my limits before that, but I felt like fraud. I felt like imposter syndrome, man. And I was only 17, and
Mhm.
I was like, I need to earn this thing, and as much as I could, and I pretty much did every day for a year and a half. I went to the school,
Mhm.
so just to feel like I earned it.
Yeah. You know, yeah, it definitely gets back to, you know, what do you, what do you, what do you want to get out of it?
Right.
Um, you know, at this stage of my training, personally, my my rank with Robbie is probably that's probably the most important one that I ever got. You know, it really, I mean, to me, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I went back and, retested with Mr. Yada and everything else, but to me, the other one was way more important to me.
And that meant something to you, and
Yeah,
because of
it
that
really did.
relationship with your instructor.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, Mr. Yada's meant something to me as well, but it wasn't that one. You know, it was different. So,
Right. Do you
but
do you feel like either were necessary to continue to train?
no.
Do you think
Well,
either were necessary? Okay.
um, I think I think for me to get more knowledge, I think they were
So it was a
to to
paywall.
to a point. I mean, it was kind of like, in a way it was kind of like a college degree. You know,
Right.
it opened up doors to knowledge,
Right.
and I'll say that it opened up doors to knowledge. Now, did it make me any better? Did it make me this? Did did the heavenly gates from wherever open up because I had this thing? No, not really. I mean, but it did provide access for me to learn new things, and so, so in some ways, yeah, it was. I mean, it it, it definitely provided some stuff, but on the same token, not really. It really didn't.
Now, do you think it was necessary for, at least at the time, for the organizations or schools you were in? Because I remember when I tested higher,
Mhm.
and I remember when we're being a little more careful because they're
Right, right, right. No, I got
right,
you.
right, right. We're being a little careful about what details we let slip here.
Okay.
Sorry, folks.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember when a couple recommendations were said for certain reasons, and some of them were legitimate and some of them were monetary.
Right.
Um, and that's when a couple of people who were close to us and ourselves as well started not feeling great about all this. But in your experience, do you ever feel it was necessary to have those boundaries established by rank? And do you feel it really solved any problems, or do you feel like it created more problems than it solved?
Mm, there, I've
We're
seen
getting
it.
dangerous here.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on, I've been on the end of a couple of these, and I, I won't go into all the details. I'll never forget one time been I just moved over to just a different organization at that point. Um, and some guy comes up to me and was telling me that I need to do certain things this way, or this way. And Yeah, that didn't set too well with me, and I, I, I honestly think that's probably the only time I've ever used the F word on the floor, and I pretty much told him to go F himself. And if he didn't like it, the lights on the ambulance was going to be the only thing that beamed to the emergency room, so he needed to shut up. And so that's when everybody started trying to break us up. So,
Now, was that matter of because you were a certain rank and he was a certain rank,
yes,
or
yeah, at the time,
right?
I really hadn't. I moved over to this other organization. I just kind of said, whatever. I don't care about rank. Just whatever. I know what I know. If people want to learn from me, cool. If not, cool. Whatever. And I was thankful at the time I had a place to train just due to layoff situations and different. It was just kind of a weird time in my life. And I was thankful for the opportunity I was given to do that, but to have someone quite junior to yourself tell you something like that when it just they didn't have the experience to really tell me that.
Right.
And I'm wording it very nicely, but basically it was not a good situation, and it wasn't going to be a good situation for him. It was just, dude, knock it off. It's not your place. So
Well, and that becomes the difference between lording something over someone because you happen to have acquired it, and not recognizing that that person, though may not necessarily have the rank, does have the experience.
right,
Um, I was talking about this with Marty a little before too, where it's like, should we really base rank off rank, or should we really base that off age, or should we really base that off experience? And or should we just base that off of skill? And who's to judge with that? It's kind of like you say. Sorry, what someone in my family sometimes wears, but it depends.
yeah. It,
And
I think all of those parameters are definitely something that needs to be looked at if you're going to have rank. I mean, if it matters, those are definitely certain things. The one thing I've really tried not to do is whenever I did get ranked was to throw it around. And I know you've seen that. Well, I'm so and so, therefore I know so much more than you do. Really? Whatever. I don't care.
maybe they know a lot about one thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean they know everything,
Right.
right?
I mean, it goes back to one of my favorite quotes from Karate Kid. You know, when Danielson he comes up to Mr. Miyagi and goes, "What kind of belt do you got?" He shows it and he goes, "Canvas. You like J.C. Penney 398?" That's the best line in the whole movie. I love that. I mean,
Like,
I wish, and in some ways, when I was still running my school, um, I tried to kind of get that kind of mentality in which um, I did some very odd things, and I told everybody don't wear gis or hakimas in class. You're gonna wear street clothes. And they're like, what? I'm like, you're gonna wear street clothes. You're gonna do kata in street clothes. You're gonna do weapons in street clothes. You're gonna do this stuff because guess what? You're in street clothes more than you're in your hakama or your karate gi. Period. You got to get used to this thing. Let's start building it out. And
right.
in that aspect, there was never. And I had a couple people walk in. They're like, "Well, I thought this was a karate school." I'm like, "It is." Well, where's your where's your gi and stuff? I'm like, no, we train in street clothes. Like, really? I'm like, yeah. Well, how do you know? I'm like, I mean, people know who the instructors are and things like that, but get away from that mentality. So I obviously didn't work because I kind of went bankrupt, but that's all right. So, but that, I mean, but in some aspects it did work because I did notice my students were a lot more open to ask me a lot of questions, a lot more
Right.
than normal. So,
Well, because you're an instructor, not an owner. I mean, you
right,
were the owner, but it's like, and that's where I come to with a lot of this is where it's if you can create a decent social environment for people to grow, the other stuff really shouldn't matter. And especially if you're an instructor, not an owner. Not you're a person first, you're an instructor second, you're an owner third.
yeah,
You need to make sure things staying afloat, or or figure out a way of maintaining it without having to worry about that. But teachers always should be open to questions. Um, because of this weird social structure that the Q Dan system has created, and especially because of people who are outside of um, what's called the Kohai Senpai relationship.
oh
They
yeah,
don't. Well, they don't. Thing is, that's something that is ingratiated in the Japanese culture systemically. Everything has that. Everything has that. From office workers to schools to working in a convenience store. Um, but in American culture and other cultures, it ain't there.
yeah,
So it becomes people become so confused by this structure that's there. Some don't, and some don't take it seriously. And whether or not that's offensive, well, it's kind of how you ever portray it. But I think that's just having people wear street clothes. I mean, that should not be radical. It wasn't radical before. If you
no,
look at some of the old photos, dudes are just they're wearing their underwear training.
yeah, exactly. I
That's it.
mean, yeah, and I mean, a lot of people thought it was radical or just really odd. So, I mean, like I said, maybe that was part of the reason I went bankrupt on it, but that's okay. I learned from it and it's all good. So,
Hopefully they learned from it too. I'm.
oh yeah,
It's a shame that didn't keep going, but
that's
learn,
okay. That's okay. So, it's all
learning
good.
from that's good. But then I guess the question would be, what could there possibly be in place of what's considered traditional QDON rank? How could you structure not necessarily a curriculum, but kind of a learning scale or learning system or progression scale, however you want to put it? What would be a good, I don't want to say substitute, but just maybe a different idea or a different take on it?
I, I, this would be this would be my idea, but I mean, probably probably several different people have got many different aspects of it, but I think instead of having QDON ranks, have it as you student, instructor, senior instructor, done. Now there is still rank there. I mean, in kind of not so much. I'm 15th Don Black or whatever.
Dear Lord.
Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. But I mean, it does shows like, okay, this person's got expertise, this person's got senior level expertise, and this is a student, just the student and stuff. But I think if you break it down into that level, just boom, 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 three steps. But are people going to be willing to do that?
I mean, I think in a lot of ways that system, that structure is already in place. Um,
To,
how
to
people, to a
yeah,
point,
to a point.
how people would transition out of the queue system, the dance system. I guess one thing would be from going from, I guess the delineation between 무단차 and 유단차 might be student and teacher,
Yeah,
right?
right.
But then, do you remain keep it? What is the time frame with that? What is the how do you move people along with that? Um, some schools some schools do, rightly or wrongly, um, depend on testing to keep revenue in their school.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, yeah. That's an interesting point you bring up on that. I mean, I got friends of mine who, they've got kids, and they tell me horror stories of testing like every month, and their testing fees will go up every month, and it's just like, one, why are you paying it? Two, holy cow! I mean, just
oh
it
yeah,
it it's like, for what are you getting? I mean, if somebody's testing for you know a Mudansha rank, paying what, 500-600 bucks for,
what
yeah,
for what?
yeah, it's like, really? I, you know, I yeah, no, and just that's just not, to me. I cringe at that kind of stuff. That
Yeah,
makes me cringe.
yeah. I mean, I get needing to buy the belt. I get needing to have the ink in the printer to print the certificate. Right? You need to
Right.
be able to do those things. Can't do them necessarily. Those things cost money. How can we? Money can be exchanged for goods and services.
Right.
Um, but yeah, $500. No, 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 no. I can see, like, I can sympathize. I don't necessarily agree with, but I can
Right.
sympathize with needing to do that. And from a business perspective, especially if you've got a lot of kids coming in and you're going to end up having, the survey says, high turnover with it. Hopefully you don't, but
Yeah. I mean,
it's an inevitability to a
right.
degree.
And I get that, and I think dojo owners can can come up with other means to recoup their costs other than stuff like that. That's just too.
Well, $500. I mean, that sounds like someone got involved in a cult.
I, like I said, I've heard several different stories about stuff like that, and you're just like, one, it just, in that case, I would say rank is not needed. Let's put
No,
it
it is
that way.
no. But I think
Yeah,
if you can kind of slowly dial that out
yeah,
and just be like, all right, you're just a student or mudancha. You haven't gained permission yet to, because I wrongly read this one time, meaning mudancha means doesn't have permission. I was wrong. It doesn't mean that, but it did make me feel like that's kind of makes sense if you think about it. It's people
yeah,
who don't have permission.
yeah.
Mudancha people have permission to a degree, right?
Right.
Um, so I I think you can kind of dial it out to that. I think if you can create, I don't want to say system, I don't want to say curriculum. Language is hard. I'm
I,
tired, but
I,
um,
I'd say, I'd say, I think it depends on your culture. It depends on
to a degree,
the culture of your training environment. Period. I think getting out a system, curriculum, all that kind of stuff. I think that has to go away. What is your culture that you're building in
right?
your
And what is
training?
what are the people you're trying to help build up in that.
Right.
I think like if you kind of start with, you don't start with requirements in terms of necessarily on the karate side, but you actually start where, a lot of people come into it, the fitness side. Because
Yeah.
I've read a bit about this where it's like, if you have the 20-pound weight or the 70-pound weakling who goes in and does karate, right? And they do karate and they're doing karate and they're doing karate, maybe they've gained maybe they built up some physical conditioning.
Yeah.
But if you're not conditioning, if you're not putting physical conditioning kind of first in tandem with their basic practice, you're setting them up to fail.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with it, but on the other hand, I think it also depends on the person.
Right.
It,
Like
it, it,
that's
it,
individual basis in a lot of ways, but
right. I mean, what do they really want to get out of it? Now, I, I mean, I took was it year and a half, not quite 2 year break from just doing karate, and I did a lot of stuff with qigong meditation, very slow movement stuff, just to do something completely different, totally different. And I remember going to the instructor, and I mean, he taught Wing Chun and this and that and all this other stuff. And I went in there and he goes, "What do you want to learn?" I'm like, "I want to learn that." And he goes, "Do you know what that is?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know what it is. That's why I'm wanting to learn. And it's something totally different than what I've done." It's like Wing Chun, yeah, you got some stuff that's a little different, but basically, yeah, you're doing different things that are somewhat similar to karate. So it's like, okay. I mean, there are differences, yes. Um, but I was looking more for meditation, things like just something totally different.
right,
And he was shocked that he goes, "How do you know what to look for?" He goes, "This is more of a jewel as opposed to a fighting art." And I'm like, that's what I'm looking for. And so, I think he also learned from me is like, not everybody's looking for just this. They're
right,
looking, maybe they really are looking for stuff, something a little different. So, and
right,
and going back to it, I mean, it was really a good, that was really great because really all you had was instructor and everybody was learning. There was no rank, no nothing. So
right.
I mean, and that's kind of where I get the instructor student kind of relationship, or you got to have somebody leading some. I mean, whatever's being taught, you can't just have.
Everyone on the floor doing their own
Yeah, you
thing,
can't have a
or
group of basically trying to herd cats. You just can't have that happen.
well, you can have. I think you can have. What's interesting is when if you take it, let's take it a little step further, right?
Hmm.
So you're talking about students and teachers. Now, what
Hmm.
if you end up, and we've seen this a little happen before, and I think everyone has seen this happen before. If school ever gets big enough, where you end up having, say, 10 or 15 or even, God forbid, 20 teachers in the same room, kind of is everyone going to be lead following everybody else, or is everyone going to be working together, or and so does that require that senior instructor to come on the floor, or
I, I mean, at that point, that's where I mean, from what I've seen, yeah, your senior instructor needs to set the direction of what your instructors teach to a point. But you
right,
also, but you also got to give the instructors freedom so that they're not only instructing, they're also learning from their instruction as well too. Because
right,
it's a different work. I mean, as well as I do, it's a different learning experience when you're teaching this stuff as opposed to going through it with somebody else, you know.
And you end up having to correct yourself so much, and because you end up seeing all these mistakes when you end up teaching,
Right.
as it was. And like I think you can learn from those because we kind of think of it in the way of the students are the mudancha, the teachers are the udancha. The udancha end up kind of bouncing off of each other and a lot more than I think most give credit for. But they also end up bouncing off the students that they have.
Right.
Um, but I think you actually hit it on the head, and didn't it didn't really occur to me till we started talking about this, where it's like the tone of the school, which comes into the culture of the school, how that's set by the senior instructor is going to determine how the cooperation between the other teachers goes.
Yeah.
Because you can have a we've seen it, a
Yep.
lot of teachers, just a lot of quote unquote black belts acting like drama queens at each other,
Oh.
um, and like "Daddy loves me best" nonsense.
Oh.
So
Or not only that, but also almost idol worship of some other instructor. It's just like, oh, gee, Christmas, get out of that. I yeah, anything like that. I don't want to have anything to do with anything like that. You go on your merry way. Don't.
and that's why it's the onus of like people who either lead an organization or lead a school to make sure that there is to kind of really recheck their culture and
Yeah,
recheck like what's going on. Um, and this is why I say you got to be a person and a teacher before you end up being an owner. Because if you are just come off as an owner, you just come off as like the guy who has money and maybe care about this at one point.
yeah,
But if you're not actively involved in not only creating a culture but maintaining a culture, right? Then it doesn't really go anywhere or do anything.
right.
In my opinion, I don't think if you can replace testing with like a training weekend, with like just a weekend where you just get together with your students, maybe you go somewhere, maybe you don't, but you have like maybe you have a lock-in, right? Like some places do. Maybe you have like a full day of training, right?
Yeah,
Every and that kind of replaces testing. You just kind of get everyone reset back to zero and be like, all right, this is where we are as a school.
yeah. I remember Robbie doing that for for about a year. And I mean, we do like he'd bring us in on a Saturday afternoon for like 4 hours, and we'd work on one thing. Boom, and that was boom, boom, boom. And so, once a month, boom. I mean, if you wanted to be a part of it, it was like $20. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but it was just like, okay, sure. An extra 4 hours of training, and it wasn't quite personalized instruction, but it was pretty intense.
Hmm.
So, uh, yeah, I mean that it's funny. I go back and I think that was some of the highlights of my training. I mean, as far as growth, just exploded.
And you get everyone together. It's a mutual experience that everyone um, kind of partakes in, and
Yeah,
everyone kind of gets pushed together. Like everyone gets tested, and
yeah,
everyone gets pushed, and everyone can show what they've got.
right,
Um, and I think more important than individual testing to a degree, because then you've got everyone working together because that just shows not only on the personal aspect but also on the social aspect, which is
right.
why you do martial arts in the first place. Because you're living in society, someone's going to attack you. If you are always loner man, then maybe you can make it work, maybe you can't. But if you can make it work together, then you can make it work alone.
Yeah, and I remember testing in front of when I tested in front of Mr. Agave. It was interesting. We were in like teams of five, And what was interesting is, oh, I forgot what the guy's name was, but doesn't matter. But he comes in and is like, look, we're going to show you stuff that's brand new. Boom. And either all of you get it or none of you get it. I mean, that's what was told to us. So if somebody in our group of five, we had to try to help them get up to speed. Like, hey, what's going on? Boom, 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 boom. Okay, this is what's going on. And I remember I remember this. It doesn't matter who it was, but it was one guy was very adamant. I was like, oh, we just got to go through it really, really fast. But we had like one person who was really getting stuck on one of the things that we were doing. And finally, myself and another guy was like, they never said anything about fast. They just said we get it.
Right.
And he goes, oh, yeah, you're right. So, I mean, and we're working with the guy. I mean, we're really working with. And you know what? The guy got it. After we said that, the guy got it in like 5-10 minutes right after that because I think he was trying to go too fast, and it was it gets back to that whole culture thing. What are you building? What are you trying to create? What are you doing?
Right. And I think if people can more adopt a, I don't want to say communal aspect of it because, you know, Jim Jones, but
Right. No, I get it. I
right,
mean,
we're not going suggesting anything like that, but and this is not foreign.
yeah,
Even though this kind of epicenter is from Japan, every time I've done Budo with people or Bujitsu with people in Japan, it has always been get together, train, party,
there you go. Yeah,
have time together, right?
right.
Whether it's been with Oji-sans and Obasans doing Kyudo, whether it's been doing karate, whether it's been doing kung fu, whether it's been doing anything here, there has never been the weird social separation that I've experienced, thankfully. Now, others have experienced that, and that's something different. But um, I think that's all I've got about to say on that.
No,
Anything you get? Anything else you got?
I don't know. I think I pretty much ran the gambit on this one. So I mean, I think I've run its course. Well, we've run its course, so it's.
We
Uh,
did a good job. We stayed on track, and we covered all ground on it.
yeah, exactly.
So what? So to kind of wrap up, what are your plans up for this week for training? Now that you've got the bionic knee.
Well, keeping raccoons out of garages, I guess that's going to be my new calling. I think with a new bow, I'll just be walking the streets with a new. No, I.
I think
Right.
there's some decent motions with that new turbo.
Well, yeah. I mean, spinning and stuff, but right now, just taking one day at a time, just going real slow with, so that I don't mess up my knee again. So I'm trying to go through what the docs are telling me to do so that I can get back on track. So that's mainly what I'm going to be doing. So it,
Cool.
it may be a little little training in karate. It may be just stretching. It may just be just different exercises that they've been telling me. So I'm like, so that's kind of where I'm at.
No, that's all good, man. That's real good. At least you can work on getting raccoons out of garages.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I've got what is it this week? Just I only have about 5 Kobudo weapons with me right now.
mm,
I've been trying to kind of refashion something I got at a hardware store into a bow.
mm,
Um, but this week I'm just working. We worked on an Enjokata a couple years back. that I'd kind of been off and on with, and it's, to my surprise, on Friday night, I was able to kind of snap it all back into place.
So that's
And
cool.
so I'm kind of this week I'm gonna make sure that it stays snapped back and try to focus on not trying to because you and me have both worked on like God, I don't know how many Kodo katas that kind of come and go.
Oh yeah.
So my goal is to kind of be like add one on, make sure it stays, keep going for a while, and then go back, look at something that I kind of let slide, put it back on the slate, and slowly just work through it to make sure everything is kind of maintained and kind of everything has a time to be worked on.
No,
So that's what I'm working.
that's cool.
Cool, cool. All right, well, that's it for today, folks. So this is John signing off.
And Jeremy. So, and one more shout out to New Zealand. Go All Blacks. Keep going. So,
Despite the typhoon and the death and destruction of it all. Oh, God.
yeah. So,
At least it's not hitting the islands anymore. But,
yeah.
well, go All Blacks, I suppose, and keep on training.
All right.
Hey, thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe as you like, and hashtag Raccoon Harpoon.